Welcome back to DM-Nastics, the gym for dungeon masters to work out their minds. I am DM Jeremy Cobb. You can call me your friendly, or excuse me, I used to be called your friendly neighborhood DM, but my players revolted, and now I'm simply the very neighborhood DM. You'll never find a more neighborhood DM than me. And I am one of your hosts for this episode, joined by...
DM Neil, aka Jote Maniac, and as someone who has listened to you be a dungeon master, it is hard to argue their point that you should have friendly removed from your title.
Yes, I honestly, fair play to them. I don't blame them one bit.
It's impossible. Okay, so the first part of this exercise, since it is your first time here in the DM-Nastics gym, I am going to see what you do with this. And I have not prepped you at all, and I don't apologize. What do we think we should entitle this exercise? So, common themes for my titles are alliteration is fun, pop culture references are fantastic. Today, so while you think about that, I'll set us up because we are looking once again at an article. Again, always to try and have a mindful eye. Look at it with as objective an opinion as we can and garner as much information as dungeon masters are wont to do from every resource available. And today's article is entitled Dungeons and Dragons, 10 Comics Characters to Inspire Your Next Rogue. So this article is brought to us by Ariel Schmeidhauser, and you can find it in the show notes as well as cbr.com.
Okay.
So now that we're looking at rogues and getting inspiration to help further inspire our players, as well as talk through some of the ways that the players brought us this concept. I want to be a rogue. I want it to be like this favorite comic book character. What are some ways that we could help them adapt it into the game? So the title for this week's exercise might be...
It might be, because I got a couple of them. Okay. I got the most simple and straightforward one is simply Roguespiration. But if we want to go a more alliterative path, we could say Inquisitor inventiveness, inspiring your next rogue. We could say pop culture crime fighters, several characters, because I think all of these characters fight crime. Every single one of them fights crime in one way or another, although some of them are also criminals. Inspire your next rogue. But this is essentially looking at a list of popular comic book characters and seeing who could inspire a rogue and whose abilities and sort of personas are rogue-like in a variety of different ways.
So is there one that stood out most? So there's 10 here. All of them are good. Some of them are questionable.
Yes.
Most will require multi-classing if you're really going for it. But was there one that stood out most to you that we can kind of break down with like the concept that I've brought it to you, my neighborhood DM, and I want to bring this to the table?
So one of the ones that immediately jumps out at me would probably be, I think Deadshot might be an interesting one. The DC character Deadshot, normally, I think he's typically a villain. I don't know if I guess he's a hero sort of kind of with the Suicide Squad sometimes. But I would say that he is clearly an assassin rogue. He's all about the guns. He's shooting, blasting. And I think he is quick enough. The major difference I would say between him and a rogue is that he shoots more often. Rogues are very much about like picking your spots, in D&D at least, picking your spots and getting that sneak attack damage in consistently, but they don't get a lot of attacks typically. Whereas Deadshot, I think, can absolutely unload with those guns of his. So I would probably go Arcane Archer, potentially. Or, I mean, if you want like more attacks, or you could go maybe like Hunter Ranger as well, or even Gloomstalker might be a cool one if you want to lean into the darkness aspect of it and just get a lot of attacks with Assassin Rogue, deadly sharpshooting. I'd definitely take the sharpshooter feat as well.
Okay, okay. Oh, gosh, I didn't mean for this. Dang it. Sometimes something gets in my head and I'm saying it and I don't mean for it to be like a pun, but then now that I recognize it is before the words came out, I can't move away from it. So given that it's Suicide Squad and all the things that are implied, I'm going to blow your mind with this next idea because they all have bombs in their head. And I don't know if I've ever looked at it this way. What would stop us from adding a touch of Warlock because technically his patron would be Amanda Waller, and we reskin everything that would be a spell as stuff he has.
Oh, I've had warlocks have their for example their Eldritch Blast be reskinned as a gun before. I think that would absolutely work. I think that's a really interesting way of doing it. What warlock subclass though? Because warlocks pick them at level 1. Let me see here. Let me look at the list. What would I don't know, the Archfey really works.
No.
I gotta think. Hexblade doesn't really fit either to me. The Fiend, if we're going in for explosives.
The great old one, just because it's offensive to Amanda Waller. He likes calling her that.
Yeah. And maybe the intercom is like the telepathy. He's like using. Yeah. Like he's using he's got like a headset and he's communicating that way. That could be kind of cool. Yeah. I think I would lean towards Fiend or Great Old One. Yeah.
With Great Old One, Awakened Mind could just be a heads up display because you already have the mask and everything on it. So I mean, there's definitely a lot. The other thing you could do is like from a backstory perspective, this is also a very interesting character if you're trying to layer in those specific aspects of, are they the only one that's has that where they're kind of under that thumb of being attached to someone like that. And that's why you could go the warlock method to solve that equation and not have it be a responsibility that all the players have. But I think it's a really interesting backstory if like one of your players, and specifically a rogue, has some things that they're going to need to do on the side that are maybe a little more questionable to the rest of the party.
Yeah. I think it's a really creative idea. I think all I would say is that you would need a DM who would let you sneak attack with an Eldritch Blast. Otherwise, I feel like it just doesn't quite. I mean, it's still cool as an idea, but I think you just got to be flexible on that one as a GM and just let him sneak attack with that Eldritch Blast.
Okay, you've total tangent on sneak attack, but given this is a rogue related situation, I feel like this is going to come up. And so when sneak attack damage happens, what kind of damage does it do?
Oh, I've always thought of it as being the damage of the weapon's type. So if the weapon, I mean, typically it's going to be doing piercing damage if it's a ranged weapon. Could be doing slashing damage. I'd have to look at what other weapons. I think there are probably some weapons that they can get that do bludgeoning, although I think very few people would use them.
So then the follow-up is, if we're allowing Eldritch Blasts to do sneak attack, then would it be doing the same type of damage as the Eldritch Blast?
Yeah, I would. That's what I would say.
And so I'm okay. Yeah, we're of the same mind, because like, well, how else would it? Why else? I mean, unless you're just like equating it down to force damage, which in some ways is even more aggressive, because now with a barbarian, like let's say you're attacking, the monster has barbarian levels for, let's say, or has damage reduction against. Well, then it doesn't count, because that sneak attack damage is force damage rather than piercing, fire, whatever it may be. So
yeah. It leans into that whole I never miss thing.
Yeah.
Because you can't resist him. He's going to hit you no matter what you do. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's a really cool idea. I think Deadshot is probably one of the more interesting ones on here. Were there any that jumped out at you as you were looking at the list?
So let's go to the one that we were both a little more confused on. Mm-hmm. We're going to go to Logan, a.k.a. Wolverine.
Yeah.
Because
Lucky Jim. Lucky Jim Howlett.
Old James. But the idea that like Wolverine in a lot of ways fills the role in Marvel that Batman does for DC, in that he fits into everything. Is it an eldritch horror? Is it just a high fantasy superhero? Is it down in the grime of Madripoor? Is it spacefaring? Sure. Is it? Is it? And the answer is always yes. For Batman and for Wolverine, the answer is yes. They will and they can. So like there are aspects where he has rogue-like tendencies a lot of the time, where he was attempting and failing to be a samurai, or when he, again, going back to the Madripoor,
fought in the Civil War.
Yeah. Fought in all the wars.
Yeah.
But the idea that like he definitely has rogue-like tendencies, but I don't feel like that's my big takeaway as a longtime lover of Wolverine. That's not kind of what goes in my brain.
No, it's the rage. It's the rage and the claws. Even the photo they have, he's letting out a primal scream. Like the image and that's what people think of him. Like when you watch the X-Men movies, I remember everybody getting excited about X-Men 2 in part because he goes berserk. So it's just and running around stabbing people with the claws. That's Wolverine.
Oh yeah, that was like the huge sell of that movie is the scene where they go in and he like jams that guy into the fridge.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is what's supposed to be happening.
Yeah. So he's got to be barbarian. Like I'll accept Rogue. I'll accept it because I'm sure he's picked up a lot of skills over the several hundred years of life that he's had. I think he's capable of being sneaky and assassinating type stuff. Like he can do that.
Can we talk about sneak attack and reckless?
Ooh,
because
exactly.
Those are the synergies we're talking about.
Exactly.
I mean, you get dash. Oh, it works too well. Dash with your bonus action just to get in there in the first place. And so like you're charging ahead once you fly into a rage using reckless attack, but then getting sneak. Even if you're there out by yourself, you still get sneak attack because you gained advantage on the attack. Expertise.
Yeah. I'm wondering, in looking at subclasses, so first of all, I think for Barbarian, some people might say Berserker, but I actually think Beast makes more sense, because my man's got to have claws. I think race-wise, you actually could say Shifter, if you wanted, and have him be, what is it, Longtooth? I know that they redid Shifters somewhat recently, and I don't know if they have all the same sub-races that they used to have, but they still, what is it called? What do they say? Yeah, no, now it's called Longtooth. Okay, yeah, Longtooth, or not Longtooth. I think there's one that lets you... Actually, yeah, we can reskin Longtooth to be claws instead of teeth. Because I don't think there's one that gives you claws necessarily, but I feel like there's always an animalistic aspect to his character. I think the ability to shifting that bonus action is like popping the claws. Rage is like, when he really starts to lose it. And again, with Beast, you could do Beast or Totem Warrior. If it's like he's, almost impervious to damage if he goes bear, for example, or Beast, he grows the claws and gets extra attacks. I think you could also argue Samurai Fighter in there as well. I think a mixture of those three. I think Action Surge makes perfect sense for him. I think, what's it called? Second Wind is perfect for him. Yeah, I think all of those would make a lot of sense. What do you think?
The other possible is, and it's here in the article, is dipping a little bit into Druid for some of the wild shape stuff. So then, focusing more on that animalistic nature. The other I think about is like, oftentimes when you comic book wise, you see him in nature and he has this affinity towards animals because he has those senses and in some ways has then the ability to communicate with them better because he can he can see and feel through like what they are feeling through. I think of the classic ones where like he's had a tough battle and he's like leaning down in the river and like a wolf comes up next to him and then drinks beside him because it's like respect. I get it. We won't start nothing here. And that kind of aspect. So Druid's a possible version. And again, it's at that point, you really have to think and ask your player like, well, okay, so how much are we going into? And I think one of the other really important things to talk to each player with is about the idea that like, okay, what is an aspect you're really looking to get out of this character? Because short of starting at like 15 to 20, there are only some things that we can show at this table. Right. Because once you and I start talking about multiclassing, it's like, okay, but how far into multiclassing do I need to get to even get the things to get the synergies? And then on my way, which am I getting first? So yeah, being really open and honest with your players, like, okay, what's like the number one thing and how fast can we get it for you? And then we can go along the way as you develop the character.
Right. Because, for example, Druid would also fit because of the healing abilities. That's another, you want that healing factor in there. Druid probably is the best fit for a primary spellcaster. Now, I don't think, Wolverine, I think, is notoriously not gifted in terms of ranged combat. He's not good as a ranged fighter. So I do think that would be where I'm like, with Druid. But I like it. I like the wild shape. I think that's interesting. I think Beast personally fits better. But like you said, it really depends on what the player wants. Do they want healing factor and then animalistic side of things? Or do they want incredibly skilled fighter, really high damage, lots of attacks, very fast, very difficult to put down. And I think at that point you'd want some, like, basically a DPS tank combo, like a close range DPS tank who just keeps coming. And I gotta think that you would lean heavily then into primarily fighter and barbarian. And then you could use, for example, rogue, you get a pile of different skills. You could potentially do animal handling as one of your rogue skills. You know, there's a few different things like that I think could be fun.
Okay, what's another one that jumped out at you?
So one of the ones that really surprised me, because I think it's one of the hardest to pull off, even though it's one of my favorite characters on this list, is number 10 here, is 5 from the Umbrella Academy. 5, I've never watched much of the show, The Umbrella Academy, but I've read the first, I think, 2 or 3 volumes of the comic. I don't even know how many volumes there are now. There may only be 3, because it took a long time for the third one to come out. But 5 was my favorite character. I love 5. If you're not familiar, 5 is essentially a child who, through some means, has gained the ability to jump forward in time, usually in small bursts. And he uses this to great effect. He's insanely fast. He'll jump forward like a split second. So he's running around dodging bullets, slaughtering entire groups of people. He's also a highly skilled assassin. I think he's been augmented like in other ways as well. Oh yeah, his DNA, that's what it is. His DNA got fused with several of history's most dangerous killers. So he's an absolute monster of combat. And in the comics, he's an old man trapped in a kid's body because he traveled like deep into the future, then got captured and experimented on and turned back into a child. So he's a dude who's like 100-year-old or more, trapped in the body of a prepubescent child.
So there are 3 volumes with a 4th on the way.
Okay.
So you have read everything. I've read nothing and only watched the show as a counterpoint. So I think this one works best storyline wise. Like, that's such a good backstory.
It really is.
Such a good backstory. And like, I would give like just anecdotal bonuses on certain things, especially if it's like the world and the storied history of the assassins over time. Like if it's, I only have real world. We're not going to play around with that. But the idea, I'll play with one because that's just too dark for me.
The idea Stephen that, Sondheim's Assassins. 5 is there.
But the idea that like, what if part of his, makeup, in some ways genetic makeup, has bits of like Jack the Ripper in it. And you have elements of a story, and then certain aspects get keyed in to them because they have this knowledge passed from someone else, and having really interesting things. Or you have both like the ability to be displaced in time and having the issues that come with that, as well as the knowledge of other areas. So I think like from a backstory wise, also really interesting to have it be in a character that you could justify a lot of the level 1-ness, because they are, 10, 12, something like that.
Yeah.
And so then they're in this child's body. So then what they're able to do, and then like as they're going along, and like, are they aging faster and unlocking these abilities more? Are they just able to like, I've just found myself in this body. It's going to take me a while to figure out how to adapt the skills I know I have to the muscles I now have, or lack thereof, rather.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Like it could just be that it takes time for them to figure out how to use their abilities in this new body. I think it's a wonderful idea. Do you have a rogue? I mean, I feel like assassin is probably the most obvious one, but are there any other thoughts on what subclass you might go with?
I feel like based on the way like I kind of took away from the show, there's a little bit of me that would like want to kind of play with Arcane Trickster to see, just because he ends up knowing all these things and having like technology and all of these other ideas at his disposal. Part of me would want to kind of touch on the idea of Arcane Trickster to see if that fits as well as I think it might, but also knowing maybe it won't. That's another great part of this conversation. Change it. If it's not working, change it. Do not force it. It's not important enough. That's all there is to that. In my opinion, that's all there is to that conversation. Who cares?
Yeah, it's your game.
Yeah, if you start with Arcane Trickster and the person at the other side, like, I come to you. I say, Jeremy, this isn't working. I thought Arcane Trickster would really sell me on being more like 5, and I just don't feel like I'm getting to do the things that I kind of wanted to do with this character. Would it be okay if I switch to Assassin?
Mm-hmm. Another one that might be decent would be Scout. If you're looking for difficult to pin down, sort of like lots of movement bonuses, that one could be good. Another one, at least it's in terms of multi-classes, because if you want the time travel aspect, there's no easy fit, but I think the closest you're going to get, it would be probably Chronergy Wizard.
Yeah.
With those Dunamancy spells. That's why I considered Arcane Trickster as well. And if you did do Arcane Trickster, you'd have to open it up to Dunamancy. I think that would be if you really wanted to get into it. Yeah. But also multi-classed Rogue and Chronergy Wizard would also be very cool. But with Chronal Shift, being able to you could exert, time around, you can exert your powers on time around you. I know there are certain Dunamancy spells that enable you to move faster and jump forward in time, I'm pretty sure. Things like that. I think all of that would be pretty cool.
Oh, that'd be a lot of fun. Okay. So my other one, because I can't let us go through and not talk about the one, the only, the Merc with a mouth.
Yes.
Deadpool is on this list. Okay, so given that you are here, and that's the really fun thing is so when Celeste is here, she always is looking at things from the idea, she is the lead game designer at Kobold Press. So her eye is geared towards what can I make that most, the majority of people will enjoy. I don't approach it that way. I got about 5 people that I got to make sure have a good time. So I can write, I write to those 5 people. I have, I certainly have written other things before, but for the majority of my making, it's geared towards my players. I don't have to think about anyone outside of the tables that I run at. So that said, as someone who has a lot more experience with being on and DMing for actual plays, I think that this concept works way better at an actual play rather than a home table, given the breaking the fourth wall.
Yes.
Especially, I think it would work a little better with a visual medium than the verbal medium, but I think you with enough editing that I've done, I think you could still really make that play. But I think that this concept, because imagine you're all there and that one person just looks directly to camera too and says something. And they're the rogue on top of it. So I think this is an amazing character concept. It's like I said, especially with the idea of an actual play.
Mm-hmm. I actually agree. A character who knows they're in an actual play could be very, very fun. I actually, in my very first long-term campaign that I ever ran in D&D, had an NPC whose backstory was that he'd gotten incredibly high and accidentally, his mind had ascended to a higher plane of reality, and he had seen the DM notes for the entire campaign. And so he knew everything that was going to happen. But the problem is he couldn't change any of it. So he had gotten Dr. Manhattaned, and he was just going through the motions. And so when people be like, "Will you help us?" And he's like, "I would love to help you, but unfortunately I can only help you if I help you. If I don't help you, then I won't help you." And it remains to be seen. Here's the problem. I don't tell you now whether I help you, but rest assured, if I help you, I'll be there. And but he would know everything and was frighteningly powerful and sort of unkillable. But that sort of I think that could be really fun to play with. As you said, I do think it works better if you're going to have a PC who knows that they're in a D&D game. I think that works better in an actual play setting, unless you simply have it be did you ever see the Gamers series?
Oh yes, one of my absolute Gamers, Darkness. Well, the original Gamers one, when they were in the college, and then their characters show up, break through in the room. Then you have Humans and Households, where you have a D&D version, and it's them playing as regular people. And you have the Darkness Rising, the Shadow. Oh, you've tapped into a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the Gamers.
Yes,
and Dead Gentleman Productions, Journey Quest. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you have, I think they had a flashback series or a flash forward series where you see all those characters just living as humans, trying to navigate the human world, having come from a fantasy world. I think that's exactly what it would be. That's the kind of thing you'd have to be. That sort of backstory, I was in a game
Yeah.
And then, or I was living a regular life, and then I realized partway through that I was in a game, and now I'm just here. It doesn't give me any special knowledge, except that my understanding of the world is super different.
Yeah. The what was it? The elf goes full Spock from Star Trek 4 and wears something to cover the pointiness of their ears.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think about is ways that if I am going to adapt this to my home game, what are some ways that I could make it feel like that fourth wall is being broken? And so one of the ones I think about is the a topic of unanimous decision. No one argues about this at all. Sarcasm heavy. Is the lucky feat.
Oh, yes.
But the idea of giving that, like, that makes a lot of sense to me, to be able to verbally and then mechanically back it up. The idea that that fourth wall can be broken, or that like the player character knew that something was going to happen. That's why instead of that one, it's going to be whatever is rolled subsequently.
Right.
So I think there are
Divination Wizard. That's another one.
Yeah, certain ways that you could definitely adapt it to make them feel like they're able to break that fourth wall, or something different is happening with their character.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think as far as rogue subclasses, Swashbuckler fits the best.
Oh yeah.
I think it's a pretty great fit. I don't even know that you would need to multi-class it, although you absolutely could. And I feel like with Deadpool also, you don't even have to. To me, he feels like the main things about him are that he knows he's in a comic book. He knows he's a fictional character, rather. He has guns and he heals and is functionally immortal. And that's the other thing. And I don't know how you do the immortality in a game. Perhaps it's just, if your character dies, that just means that they are so damaged that it will take them an incredibly long time to regenerate. Or perhaps it's some other thing, like their consciousness is immortal, and so their consciousness gets like booted to another reality or something, which is actually kind of the way D&D works anyway. Like usually your soul just goes to another plane. But I think there's a few different ways to do something like that. I don't know what, I mean, obviously something like Relentless Endurance could be fun. Yeah. I think Fighter, again, with Second Wind, anything that lets you heal yourself. Monk, I think, gets an ability that lets you heal yourself, possibly depending on the subclass. Yeah, there's a few different options there. But I think that in terms of the knowing that you're in something, that you're in a fictional world, anything that would allow you to affect probability would be great. So Luck, Divination Wizard. You could also do, again, you could probably do Chronergy Wizard, like you're able to, because you've seen beyond the veil, you can affect the time and space. Maybe, what's it called? Clockwork Soul. I think that also is like very much about control spells. Clockwork Soul Sorcerer, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Alarm, Protection from Evil and Good, Aid, Lesser Restoration, Dispel Magic. You get stuff, Restore Balance, for example. When a creature you can see within 60 feet is about to roll a d20 with advantage or disadvantage, you can use your reaction to prevent the roll from being... So that's another one where it's like you knew what was going to happen, so you arranged things. And that also could, if you lean more into that aspect of it, you could maybe do a Mastermind rogue and have it be like, you're a puppet master who knows, like you've either lived this already or you read the story and you're trying to manipulate things. I heard about, there was an anime where a young woman somehow got transported into like her favorite romance anime or something.
Oh, okay.
And she knows that the character she plays is supposed to die in the story, and she's like, oh no. And so she's trying to change the direction of the story and make it so that the original protagonist dies, the original heroine, and she gets to get the guy instead. Like that's I think the story that I had never actually seen it, but I'd heard about it. It sounds pretty cool, but that kind of story could be fun.
Well, the other thing I think is, and this is caution, whatever alarm bells need to go off in your brain. I say this next part and caution it heavily. There's nothing stopping. First off, there's nothing stopping you from anything. It's your game. Do whatever you want. But there's nothing stopping you from adding certain aspects of certain classes to these characters to make them feel like they are more like comic book characters. But in doing so, if there are other players that are not, you're then not doing those same sorts of things for, you got to kind of bring everybody along with you. Because my thought is like adding Second Wind. Just carte blanche, like not having a dip in Fighter, but adding Second Wind to like kind of mimic that regenerative ability, but just doing that from jump, and letting that be okay.
and divination portent rolls. You could make a custom class.
Yeah, and then from there, they're thinking about like, okay, so if I've done that for this character, what are the things that I'm going to think about adding for all of the other characters as well?
Right.
So unless you're taking something off, but that never feels as good. Just add a little extra. Okay, well, we have done it. So then I think the question I've had in my mind, and I feel like you've probably have too. Are there any comic book characters that stand out to you that were not on this list?
One that jumped out, Rorschach from Watchmen, I think is a straight up rogue. Inquisitive. I think you could say he's an inquisitive rogue. I wouldn't say you could give him a level or two of monk because he is a skilled hand-to-hand combatant. Or maybe fighter with the unarmed fighting style probably fits better. I think fighter with the unarmed fighting style, but inquisitive rogue, he's walking around, he's got the mask. I would also love to see him as like a changeling where but his powers are all in the mask. And so the mask he doesn't really have control over it, but the mask is constantly shifting. So you never quite know his identity. And he just has sort of like this permanently unstable thing. And even I know I can't remember if the Changeling still has this, but I know the original UA version, you could create personas and then gain specific proficiencies or bonuses from inhabiting those personas. That would fit with the whole give me back my face. And there's Rorschach and then there's Walter Kovacs. I think all of that would be pretty cool.
Nice. I'm trying to find a book I wrote. I swear that this is literally something I made before. But so I'll vamp and talk at the same time. So to keep with the Rorschach and trench coat based theme, the number one person that I thought of that I was kind of surprised wasn't on this list was John Constantine.
Ooh,
we're talking about an arcane trickster to a T.
Yeah.
It's John Constantine.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Because my thought is do I even need to, kind of the same conversation as earlier. Do I even need to multi-class? I don't think I do.
No.
I think I could just make it all happen right then and there.
Yeah, that's a wonderful one. That's fantastic. For me, the obvious one, it's not a comic. I mean, he's not a comic book character per se. Probably appeared in some, but Sherlock Holmes, the classic inquisitive rogue. Yeah. I think a character, the Kingpin. Now, people would not normally think of the Kingpin as being, and maybe Kingpin's the wrong guy, but I feel like there are a lot of mob boss, crime boss comic book characters who could fit under the mastermind banner, where their powers are about manipulating and influencing other people rather than any their own abilities. And one other character who's not a comic book character, but who jumped out at me as a potential rogue is the protagonist of the game Disco Elysium. I won't say his name because it's a spoiler if you haven't played that game, but he would absolutely, in my opinion, be an inquisitive rogue. He would be a reborn class, or race rather. His race would be reborn, and then you could maybe multi-class him with any number of things depending on how you spec the character. One of the most interesting ones might be an aberrant mind sorcerer. So if you lead into the Inland Empire type skills, which is his connection to the weirdness and vaguely paranormal things that happen around him, having warped his perception of reality.
Nice. So the Ultimate Guide to Hair is a supplement that I had kickstarted with Celeste, and it's literally just harkening back to the old Ultimate Guides, like the Ultimate Fighter, things like that. So it varies between very funny and very creepy. But what the Rogue one was the Assimilator. So basically you focused on the ability to just blend into any and every room. So then that's kind of where the idea of that ever changing face and not remembering who they were or who they could be or anything like that. So that was the one that came to my mind.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Perfect. So we've done it. But if you like that, you can always head over to your podcatcher of choice, leave us a rating and review. Word on the proverbial street is that is super helpful. And of course, if you wanted to email us and tell us about the comic book character that you've adapted to your game, you can always do so by emailing us at dmnastics@gmail.com. And of course, if you head over to Twitter, aka X for now and sometimes later, we're at DMS_block. I'm at Jote Maniac, and
I am at Jeremy Cobb1. That's Cobb with 2 B's and the number 1.
Perfect. And for everything else on this network, you can always head over to the Block Party Podcast Network
A huge thank you to the bards over on Bombarded for our intro-outro music. You can find out more about Bombarded at never gonna say all that. You can find out more about Bombarded at bombardedcast.com.
Rather than let these mental gains go to waste, let's head to taking your supplements.
Taking your supplements.
So today on Taking Your Supplements, I am not alone, but we also have a very interesting thing to talk about. But I'll let my lifting partner introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Rue Thompson, and I am with Adventure Week Games.
Yes, AAW Games.
Yep.
Go there, find them. It's definitely one of those products where it has helped me, and I know I'm probably the target audience as soon as I say this, but I often look for small things to add to my games. I am not really the person that just wholesale picks up like whole campaign settings or whole like adventure paths would be a Pathfinder reference, which is key. I'm already segueing this. Look at me go.
There we go. Nice.
Yeah, but
nice.
the idea that like, oh, it's this path from 1 to 20. I just feel like there's so much input and back and forth from the players that like I'd prefer peppering in produced material into the homebrew world and setting that I've created, which is what I do in my home game. Like I've pulled stuff from AAW, I've pulled stuff from Steamforged Games. It's just like to say, okay, this speaks to exactly what I'm looking for. And then I'll just, turn the dials on making it fit my exact campaign, which then I realize when I go and try and run those things again, and then I look at it, I'm like, oh, I feel like Gandalf. I'm like, I don't remember any of this.
Any of this, right.
But speaking of adventure paths and Pathfinder, I think there's something that's currently on the old Kickstarter.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're familiar with Kickstarter out there, which I'm sure all of us are, I don't know a gaming enthusiast that isn't, but out there we have the Mini Dungeon Tome 2 for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now we just funded and are in the process of fulfilling Mini Dungeon Tome 2 for 5e. And that was earlier this year that we kickstarted that. And so now we're converting all of that to Pathfinder 2e, much to a lot of community demand, honestly. And if you're not familiar with our mini dungeon tomes, it's a collection of our mini dungeons that we release on a weekly basis on Adventure Week Games. And we collect them all, and it ranges from level like adventures for level 1 all the way to level 20. So we're there. We're providing stuff for every level of gamer, and they're meant to be dropped in, kind of setting agnostic. They're ready to go into whatever setting you're putting your campaign in. And let's say you have a night where maybe somebody isn't going to be there, but people still want to run, but you don't want to necessarily push your homebrew plot line forward. Grab a mini dungeon, play for a couple hours with your characters. And like you said, if you want to kind of break up that long form campaign that you've been working on your homebrew and pepper in some kind of canned content, mini dungeons are a great option for that.
I've also realized that the mini dungeons and the one shots are another great way to help people learn the rules, because the stakes aren't the same, in the sense that like narratively the stakes aren't the same because this isn't my long running character. Mathematically the stakes aren't the same because if I live or die, I don't know, but if the characters live or die in the one shot, it's also not that big of a deal. And so
for sure.
I ran one recently for that reason, because it's a couple newer people. So then it's just like, okay. And then at that point, I really come to the other side of the screen to say, well, if it were me, because I also don't want to push too heavy, but I would say if it were me, tactically, these are some options that you could look at, and these are the reasons why. Because it's like, well,
sure.
like, again, even if my monsters live or die on the other side of this, like it can be used more as a learning tool rather than trying to learn these kinds of things with your character, only to find that,
sure.
Well, these aren't the options I should have taken. I could have done so many more intelligent things with this character that is now dead or hurt or lost something that you didn't even know you were wagering with the idea.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things. When I first got into gaming, which I consider myself kind of fairly new. I say that, and I've been saying it now since 2015, but I still consider that fairly new when most of the people I game with have been gaming for decades. So I'm kind of the new kid at the table, but we had started, I got brought right in. My first session was, I believe, a Daughters of Fury session that had already started. It was a campaign, which I think is a Pathfinder AP. Yeah, I just kind of got dropped in with with everybody that had already been playing for quite a while, and it was intimidating, and I had no idea what I was doing. And so it would have been great if we could have had something like this to just introduce me to even what role playing was.
Yeah, I'll always, I mean, longtime listeners will know this is my origin story, but it applies here. So, new listener, here you go. But the person that first got me into it, yeah, like 25 years ago, they had created pre-gens for the Sinister Secrets of Saltmarsh and helped me run a whole group
Wow.
of PCs. And then after that was done, the module was done saying, okay, well, what of those did you like the most and why? And then it's
Mhm.
like, okay, so then these are probably the characters you would like to play. Then ran me in a solo campaign with just one character. And then I joined the home table after that kind of thing. Because I
Wow.
was pretty young. So I think it was maybe 10. Yeah, 10 to 12, somewhere in that range. And it was
Yeah.
just, it
Sure.
feels, it makes so much sense now, like with like the modern sensibilities, but at the same time, it's like, I feel like that's kind of a weird approach back then. Like the idea of like
Yeah. I
almost like two prep sessions of like, why would you even want to play D&D? Okay, now that you do, here are these characters. Why do you like these characters? And then
I think that's phenomenal, though. I wish I knew more DMs who
yeah,
did that, to be honest. That's great. That's great.
each person and like truly guide them into the hobby. So yeah, I
Yeah.
attribute all things back to that person, and now they're at my home game still, and they're now at the game that I run for my kids. So the circle is the
Okay,
circle
nice.
is very complete. I think
The circle's
I think I'm
complete.
supposed to fade into the sunset is what I tell people. I think I
At
yeah, I
some
think
point, yeah.
I've reached it.
No.
But yeah, what is the I already have the digital file for the 5e edition, so I'm very convinced of what is here. What I will say is then someone, I mean, just for full transparency, is someone with the idea of
Mhm.
like potentially writing some of these, what I noticed the most about
Sure.
them is that the individual writer is truly allowed to be the whoever they are. And so I think there's a lot to be
Mhm.
said about going through these and finding which ones speak to you the most, and then potentially like kind of backtracking and see if there are other ones by that specific writer of the one that the author that speaks to you the most. And then of course, like you said, it's broken down into individual tiers of play. The other nice thing is it's really easy to kind of tell what you might get into because every single one has a map. So the second you look at the map, you're
Sure.
like, well, that
Sure.
fits. Well, that doesn't fit. So that's also what I've noticed. It's also
Right.
really helpful is like there's just some like really quick hit pieces there to tell you like this would or wouldn't work for what you're looking at.
Yeah, the one thing that and I believe this is unique to the mini dungeon tome, the second one that we've done, because we did release one a few years ago that had, I believe, 117 adventures in it. This one, I think we're looking at about 140, right around 140, 141. And again, these are things that we have published weekly and that people do collect through the years and things. But we try to put them in this ultimate tome for everybody to access. There's a map pack that you can get that includes all the maps and that includes a GM map, a player map, and one designed for virtual tabletops. But yeah, the book is broken down. There's lists in the back where you can select your terrain. So, are you running an urban adventure? Are you running a forest? Is your party currently underground? And you need an underworld campaign or a one shot. All of that is available in the book, so you can go through and see it broken down, not just by our character level. You can do it by number of players. You can do it by terrain, all kinds of things. We've tried to make it very accessible to gamers of all levels and make it easy for you to find what you're looking for, kind of on short notice. I mean, these are great where it's like we're all adults and we all try to schedule adults at a gaming table, and it can be an adventure
That's the
in and of
true
itself. It can be
quest.
yeah, that's the true quest, is finding time when we can all get together and actually play. But let's say you've got friends, and let's say you got friends.
Good
No,
start. Great
let's
start.
say you got great start, and you guys just want to get together. You're short notice. Hey, it's Friday night. Let's play D&D for a few hours. well, grab the book and be kind of like, well, what do we want to do? Do we want a high level thing? Do we want a mid level thing? We've all got characters stowed away somewhere. I know we all have stacks of character sheets we can pull on when we need to, and say, well, I want to run something in an urban setting. Okay, well, here it is. I found it. Let's try this one. And they're 2 pages. Generally, in the past we've had some a little bit longer, and spoiler alert, we may kind of branch out a little bit more as time goes on, but right now they're 2 pages, usually 4 to 6 rooms per map. Each mini dungeon has a custom map and custom artwork. So I mean, you're getting these elements that are kind of hard to find in a collected tome like this, that don't require you to have historical, a previous adventure that you're kind of feeding into. This is a standalone tome. You don't have to have played any of the mini dungeons in the book, in the first book. I mean, you don't have to play mini dungeon 118 to play mini dungeon 119. So we can have these kind of spontaneous adventures, and we try to bake everything into the text for you.
Yeah, that's the heaviest lifting you would have as a game master or dungeon master with these. Adding them to your long running campaign is how, what are the connective tissues that you have from the session before this to the session after this. Like, that's by far and away, that's going to be your heaviest lift, is to make sure that those kind of things
ties in.
Yeah, ties in. But other than that, also, I just think it's kind of funny. I will just throw general shade. I'm not going to throw specific shade. But general shade would just be like, that's crazy. You mean to tell me there are multiple indexes that a person could read? I am used to 0 indexes. And just that's the true adventure of the book. I wonder what's on the next page, because I have nothing to indicate what it might be.
That's right. No.
Barely a table of contents.
Nope. Very familiar with that. As a layout person, it's been in gaming layout for 5 or 6 years now. I'm like, there are some books that I wish somebody would have asked just anybody to look at one time.
I came across one recently. I may have complained enough about it that it's probably a known quantity. And I'll say this one just because it's so far afield from what we're talking about. But the Marvel RPG one, there's not a PDF file available. There's only, you can do it through Kindle, at which point there are no bookmarks. There's no table of contents. There's no index. It is merely like scrubbing with the little dot on the bottom is the best you can do. Or full VTT support. And it's like, well, okay, but then I don't have those. And I'm not interested in purchasing it for that, because I don't think I'm going to run it with a consistency that justifies that expense for me. You don't even have a PDF. And then I came to find out that the new supplemental material does have PDFs, which leads me to believe that there are issues only with it being the actual core rule book. And
interesting.
There are legal loopholes. And I don't know. I can't tell if that makes me more or less frustrated. So I just try not to think about it.
Not to think about it. Yeah. No, I can assure you, which you have the PDF for Mini Dungeon for 5th edition. We do our best to provide completely interactive PDFs with bookmarks, hyperlinks that usually link to as much as possible. We try to use open5e.com for any external resources. We include some Kobold Press monster tomes like Tome of Beasts 1, 2, and 3, and the Creature Codex. So, we try to incorporate those kinds of things, and we try to link those as much as absolutely possible. So if you buy the PDF variant, then you can, while you're looking at it, it will have a hyperlink, and you just click that and it gives you everything you need. So a DM can have their iPad or their computer behind their GM screen and easily access anything that they would need to run those adventures.
Yep. I'm a current and big proponent of DM screen with an iPad behind it, because I also feel like I can lift it up, because I remember the days of like having a laptop and just being terrified of like trying to lift it up so that they could see, but then like also like cover stuff, like, because you don't want them to see everything. The iPad and being able to zoom with the pinch motion has made that a tad easier than in previous years.
See, I wonder if is there a market for creating a GM screen that has an iPad stand integrated that you could then just flip up and hold and then flip back down.
I like it. Well, as long as you leave the gyroscope feature on when you flip it up, and it automatically. Ooh, I like it.
See. Always thinking. That's
Okay, now that we're thinking, dear listener, I apologize, but I don't. So you have it where it's on a spin, and so then you could rotate it so that it would rotate out and face them, and then rotate it back.
Yeah, I bet there's a way. You do a little. I bet there's a way.
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna think about it now. I'm not very crafty, but I know people who are.
Yeah.
So-
agreed.
so-
Agreed. I can't do art very well, but I know people who can.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Where would a person go? Where is the best place for them to go to either look into this Kickstarter, future Kickstarters, or just in general?
Absolutely. So AAW Games, of course, we have aawgames.com. And that's where you can go to look at and purchase any of our previous products. Of course, one of our big ones is Rise of the Drow, which we did a collector's edition for 5e just a couple years ago now, I believe, and it's kind of our top seller, or in my opinion, that's what everybody seems to know us for. But yeah, you can check out our mini dungeons, check out our mini dungeon tomes, check out our mini dungeon soundtracks. We offer a soundtrack with ambient tracks. But yeah, AAW Games is our kind of core place to send you to. We also have a very active Discord, which you can get to from our website. For the Kickstarter, of course, kickstarter.com/project/adventure week. And I think it's Mini Dungeon Tome 2 for Pathfinder 2. It's probably easier just to type in Mini Dungeon Tome 2. And it'll be the first result that pops up there. And it is fully funded, but we still have 20 days to go. You really can't beat the value of what you're getting for it. So I highly recommend anybody who's interested and has ever played any of our previous products on 5e or anything like that. If you're looking at getting into Pathfinder 2e, the monsters are getting kind of adjusted to fit the Pathfinder 2e model. And we have William Fisher is our Pathfinder conversion expert, and he's been with us for a number of years and has worked on many other projects in the past. So I highly recommend you checking it out. And I'm very proud of the work that we do on the mini dungeon lines. We put a lot of hard work into it. We've got great authors, always inviting new authors to join us, and we're excited to play games and help everybody else play games.
Perfect. So with that, we'll turn out the lights and head out of the gym.
Before we go, I want to implore you, the listener, to join the forums, the Discord, the Twitter, and anywhere else you can find us, and take part in these challenges, exercises, and other amazing conversations being had.
And to do that, head over to dungeonmastersblog.freeforums.net and try some DM-Nastics, so your players don't ask, do you even lift?